metaphor for Indian country and Indian country's issues. It's the basement.
I didn't think that the American Indian Studies Department would be in the basement of a building called Dakota Hall. I thought that Dakota Hall would be the American Indian Studies Department.
USD was founded as a land-grant institution in 1862, following the outcome of the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862 and the opening of what is now South Dakota for white settlement. In 1889, South Dakota achieved statehood, while all the Lakota and Dakota people within its borders were forced, often violently, onto reservations. 80 years later, USD was one of the first universities to house an American Indian Studies program, and can currently boast an American Indian Studies department. But where does USD stand in terms of cultivating and retaining Native intellectuals? If one were to compare USD to a Southern university, would it not be outrageous, if not racist, to house Afro-American studies in the basement of Martin Luther King Jr. Hall? Then why, after 40 years, is American Indian Studies still in the basement of Dakota Hall? A hall named to honor the original inhabitants of this land. Physically, USD has kept Indian intellectualism in the basement. Institutionally, USD has kept Indians out of academics because it refuses to address its historically deplorable retention rate of American Indian students, let alone acknowledge the potential for creating a diverse atmosphere that is reflective of all the state's demographics.
You know, if you know anything about the history of this area, Dakota, of course, is the nation that's originally from this area. So Dakota Hall being named after, you know, my nation, my people, and then to be put in that basement of that building sends several messages.
Where is that line between being kind of, it's just the everyday and oh, they weren't really thinking about where it's placed and really where is the hidden racism in that, and wanting to be put them down in the basement so that they're not really seen. I think both of that is true, that some people are well-meaning and they don't understand, and they may have thought, well, this seems like a pretty good place and this is the only place we have at the time, but then I believe that there's other administrators that could have purposely wanted to put American Indian Studies down, symbolically placing them in the basement as maybe not as important, or just kind of they can go over there and not be seen.
If the only nod you have towards diversity or inclusion of something other than the master historical narrative, which is very much promoted here, is an American Indian Studies program, it certainly shouldn't be in a basement, and not only in a basement, but in a basement with significantly environmentally hazardous problems that are difficult, are bad not only for students and the professors working there, but are destructive to the archival collections that are incredibly valuable, that are held here in the oral history department or in the oral history program, but not really recognized by the university as valuable.
Ideally, down here we should have a climate-controlled environment, first of all, with both temperature and humidity controls, because the more the temperature and humidity levels fluctuate, the more it affects the rate at which the tapes that we have degrade.
You know, if we can still draw people from all over the world who come here because they expect the best of the best, and then they get here and they're astonished by how Native subjects, peoples, departments, etc. are treated, that gap needs to be closed.
And I guess before I came, I kind of expected the Oral History Centre to be sort of a big, shiny building, or centre as the name suggests. And I remember when I first came down here, in my first week here, I was pretty excited to check it out and see what was available, and I was pretty surprised to find it was down here in the basement, because that's not really what the name would suggest and what the quality of the sources would suggest would be available for them.
The South Dakota Oral History Project is the largest of 6 door-stoop collections in the nation. The primary goal of the project was to collect the history of American Indian people from their perspective. Through the project, interviews were recorded in every county in South Dakota, specifically with individuals who recalled events before and around 1900. Currently, this collection contains approximately 5,400 interviews. The South Dakota Oral History Center collection has been valued at $5.5 million and is an invaluable resource for those who wish to know more about the history of Native and non-Natives on the Northern Plains.
This is where we house our files, our reel-to-reel tapes and cassette tapes. If you'll notice, they're on wooden shelves, which is not good for them. In here, we have our transcripts, which are all typed up in acidic paper. And if you just take a whiff of these, you can smell the acid coming off of them.
This is the storage closet in the cache library adjacent to the South Dakota Oral History Center. In here we have all sorts of potential environmental and health hazards. On the pipes up there, if you can zoom in, we have what could be growing black mold from the humidity in here. And also, directly above is another example. The insulation on the pipes in here looks like it could be a sort of asbestos fiber in a condition that I believe is called frying. And it's completely degraded here to the point where the insulation is falling off and probably releasing whatever sort of particles into the air. There was an independent report done on the condition of the Oral History Center back in 2005. And while that was more in regard to the condition and preservation of the tapes and recommended a more climate-controlled environment, there are definitely negative health impact risks down here as well.
The Environmental Protection Agency states, molds have the potential to cause health problems. Molds produce allergens, irritants, and in some cases, potentially toxic substances. Inhaling or touching mold or mold spores may cause allergic reactions in sensitive individuals. Allergic responses include hay fever type symptoms such as sneezing, runny nose, red eyes, and skin rash. Allergic reactions to mold are common. They can be immediate or delayed. Molds can also cause asthma attacks in people with asthma who are allergic to mold. In addition, mold exposure can irritate the eyes, skin, nose, throat, and lungs of both mold allergic and non-allergic people. Well, I'm a graduate assistant down in the South Dakota Oral History Center.